welcome to another episode of the Aftershow. Today, we are going to be talking about the one, the only, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and his movie that I might have enjoyed called Black Adam. We love him. We love what he's cooking whenever he cooks anything. But listen, we're going to be breaking down the movie. We're going to be diving into all the details. And then we're going to be talking about, of course, what we always talk about. And that is, where does this film leave us? What's the future of this film? What's the future of the Black Adam now franchise that The Rock has already said we're going to have, and the DCEU?
You have two choices. You can be the destroyer of this world, or you can be its savior. That's up to you.
So who better to talk about Black Adam than Dwayne Johnson? Just kidding. Mike Kalinowski, how are you? He's an author. He's an actor. Thank you so much for joining. I'm glad you got the wearing the black memo.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Well, I heard I was going to be co-starring with The Rock as well on this, so there's nothing I can do. I figured maybe a black T-shirt.
Where's your chain, dude? Where's your chain?
I don't have any jewelry. I should have pulled something out of the closet.
Thing.
I think I would have pulled it off looking more like Mr. T than he looks in his chain there. No
man jewelry. That's okay. None. I'm totally on board with that.
None.
This, of course, was a look from way back when. So before we dive into it, I'm going to point out that there is a big discrepancy in the tomato meter score and the audience score. The tomato meter score being 39%. And the audience score being 90%. I think that's the biggest difference in any of the after shows I've ever covered. But here is the critics' consensus. They said Black Adam may end up pointing the way to an exciting future for DC films, but as a standalone experience, it is a wildly uneven letdown. So before we go into all the details, overall, Mike,
yes. Did
you smell what The Rock was cooking or did you not? Which is a metaphor for, did you overall enjoy the film or not enjoy the film?
I think I always smell what The Rock is cooking. Now, do I leave satisfied after the meal? I'll say this. I did smell what The Rock was cooking.
Okay.
I, though, didn't feel the hierarchy of power changed in the DCEU like he was claiming for years now with this. So I'm somewhere in the middle of the audience score and the critics score. I'm somewhere maybe like in the 60, 70 area,
okay.
A little better than halfway through it. I have thoughts. I guess we can talk about.
We will talk about it. I overall enjoyed the pants off this movie. I had such a good time with it. And I'm going to put it out there. I did see it late. I normally go to see critic screenings and then the audience, reception filters in. And because of the Rotten Tomatoes score, I went into it with absolutely no expectations. I went in hearing like the story was so all over the place and bad. And I just heard so many negative critic things. But I want to point out something. And Mike, I want to know if you agree with me or not. Because what I see a lot online is people saying, oh, don't listen to the critics. This was an amazing movie. I think both things can exist at the same time. I think you can have a movie that by a critical perspective, when you talk about critics, they see 200, 300 movies a year. From a critic's perspective, maybe it was a 39%, but from an audience perspective, it still can be a really great, fun movie. Both can be true. Do you agree, or do you think they should be more cohesion between the two scores?
I think 100% with you on that. It's surprising this past week I've seen on Twitter, because my kind of circle of friends is all in the film industry. A lot of them are pundits. And I find that's such a disservice to what critics do. A lot of people rely on critics' reviews. They don't see 40, 50 movies a year. They got to kind of spend their money where they want to and get a critic's score. But I also feel it's tough because that people go to school for being a critic, and they have such an insight. A lot of times, especially when it comes to even DC films, they pick up stuff that I don't ever think about. But also, there is something to be said about, just going to a movie and enjoying it. Just like you said, you have no expectations going in. And I think that's a problem with these superhero films now. We're getting to the point where if it doesn't connect to 5 stories before it and give us 5 stories beyond it, you're like, wow, the story was lacking. And sometimes you just go in, I think I was the same as you. I didn't see a critic screening. I just wanted to go in no expectations. And for me, the character of Black Adam was never a great character, a fan of mine. I was never a big fan of his. So I wasn't like, I've got to see this. I've got to see this. For me, I think it was more the JSA and of course, Pierce Brosnan, knowing what he was attached to this film. So I went in for that. And on that end, I left completely satisfied with Pierce Brosnan and with what of the JSA they gave us.
So you're a comic fan. So when you say like you weren't super interested in that character, what about him? Because what I thought was interesting was, and The Rock talked about this, he is so charismatic as a person, but from what I understand, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, the character of Black Adam isn't supposed to be a super charismatic person. He's very sort of inward and sort of brooding. And he definitely did that. But I think we're always expecting The Rock to be The Rock, and he didn't do that. And it felt very contained.
100% right. Like the character, and it's so funny when he was in, I think I want to say this is like 15 years ago, they were talking before Iron Man came out. This was in the talks, and on our show, DC Movie News from years ago, before the pandemic, we kept hearing news of Black Adam. We're like, no way this film is ever being made. There's no way. And then as it got closer and closer, and we all talked, like the key of this film will come down to The Rock, because he is such a personality and such a celebrity. And every movie he did, like they do that meme you see where it's like 4 pictures of him with a brown shirt, and it's like, these are all 4 different movies. Like you're so used to playing the same role or same type with the smolder and the wink, and he's so good at it. He's a guy that you just love watching. But Black Adam is a kind of a tragic character, and you're just like, it is going to hinge on his ability. And I have to say, from me personally, that was the complete surprise of the movie for me, was how good he was in the role. And I didn't see the smoldering Dwayne Johnson. I saw Teth Adam, this fully fledged out character. A lot of the movie around him had some Rock eccentricities of Dwayne Johnson eccentricity. I'm not even saying the word. Eccentricity. There it is.
Ding.
Like the pop music that gets thrown in. I think they're regretting the Kanye West choice in this film at one point. But for him, I thought he did the character complete justice.
Yeah, I thought he did too. I did see, I think it was at the very end of the film when he's decided not to rule, but to protect. There was something that changed in either the makeup or the look where I was like, oh, that's The Rock. But for the rest of it, to me, he was Black Adam, which actually leads me into my next question. And that is sort of the way that this film was set up. The very beginning, when they do the prologue, the 5,000 years ahead, I heard some people complain about this in Kondak, where we meet the father and son, which, is later revealed that, you think he is, or maybe you're meant to believe he was the son, but he ends up being the father in the equation. Just sort of how you felt about that opener, because I thought it was touching and heartbreaking. Like I love the world that they built, and I thought I really felt for both characters. I thought they set it up in a beautiful way. Was there exposition? Yes. Did there have to be? Yes. And I loved the reveal of him when you see him as not Black Adam yet. He doesn't have his name yet, but the cloak and the hood, like the first reveal of him, I was like, what's it going to be? And it was so like, I was like, whoa, that's like, he's not The Rock. He's Black Adam. How did you feel about sort of the way they set up this film in the opening sequence?
Nikki, I know I said I was kind of in the middle of this, but the way you even highlight stuff, I think this will change my score higher, because I thought about this, like going, and again, you're trying to disassociate everything that comes forward. And everyone's like, oh, it's so rushed at the beginning. This, and then it doesn't slow down. It's like, but okay, so would you have rather gotten a movie where this was the entire movie and he becomes Black Adam at the end? You're like, how many films do we see that and it ruins the movie? You're like, he just becomes the hero in his costume at the very end. It's an origin story. They got it. I thought it was a concise, like you said, you feel for him going on this journey from the beginning. And I was completely fooled into the switch. Like I figured they were doing the classic, the kid dies or the kid gets reborn as Teth Adam. But so I thought that worked so well. I didn't feel rushed. I feel we got everything we needed to set up. I think it might have been a little jarring for people to jump into Kondak present day with Intergang taking over everything. And there was it's there a little bit. And Intergang is kind of it's not even really a deep cut. It's more of a Superman mob that's in Metropolis. But I went on board. I was like, okay, it's Intergang. They're there for the mineral that's there, and that powers their vehicles, and that's their weapons. So they're a mob and terrorist outfit. So of course they would go there. So, but I thought the setup at the beginning was great. I had no problems with it.
Yeah. I mean, if you had spent too long, like you said, how long would we have waited to actually see The Rock on screen?
Right.
Like you want to see him fairly soon in the movie, right? Like otherwise it would be like 30, 40 minutes before The Rock appears. And that's all you would have heard people complain about. Oh, it took 40 minutes to get to him. So I think they did a really nice job of setting it up. I thought it was super emotional. I thought it was a great family story. And I think from the comics, there is sort of an element of that character and sort of they were true to the comics in that sense. But I wanted, and this is jumping ahead a little bit, people are also commenting about the shrunken DJ when he shrinks back when he's his size, and people are saying his head was the same size. And I heard people say, and that his body was small. I heard people say that before I saw the film. I have to disagree. I thought his head was shrunk a little bit. I don't think it was quite as big as it normally is. But again, I really felt for his character. Like it was really, it was sort of similar to how I felt about the first Captain America. When you see him sort of smaller and sort of, not at his best, that you really, I felt for The Rock in a different way than I have before.
Again, yeah, I thought, like, I enjoy The Rock. I think he's the kind of guy that I would love to talk movies with and sit down and have dinner with. So I'm never not going to have a good time at his movies, whether they're for me. Like the Fast and the Furious films are really not for me. But he has a whole generation of audience goers that love those. So for me to see him come into the DC universe, my big thing was like, oh, I just hope he's not going to turn and we'll see the eyebrow raise. And even with the kids, like you got to have a catchphrase, you got to do this. They played it so under like an undertone, and they really downplayed it, which they could have gone over the top with it. Yeah. And they didn't. They left it this, I don't want to say a tragic character, but it was in a sense where he knows he's not a hero, and it's the whole fight within. But he also sees these people and that he wants to protect, and how much his world has changed. So again, the big like question mark of this film was going to be him, but he turned out to be a joy for me. And I loved it. I loved him in the role, and I cannot wait to see more of him in the role. Yeah, I think if they had done the humor, and they could have really gone off the deep end on it for it, with the naming him and the catchphrases, and even him with the kid being in the bedroom and like him being like a fanboy and having all this stuff in the background. They could have made all these jokes, and then people would have said, "Oh, they're trying to be like Marvel." Oh, there you go. Yeah, that would have happened. And they didn't. There was the humor, but it wasn't ha-ha funny. Right. It was just there, but they didn't, it wasn't sort of the sticking point of the movie. The movie didn't rely on the humor. The one thing that I will say overall that I literally had to watch a couple of breakdowns by people who are, looking for Easter eggs, because there was a few plot points that I did sort of miss that were a little confusing, but they were introducing a lot in this movie. So there was some stuff that I was like confused about. Did you overall follow the story, or were there any moments that you were like, huh, wait, what? Well, this was like one of those ones after the theater last night, and I was at work and I had time to digest it. And they do cram a lot in, and it's particularly with the JSA. So you're sitting there, and the JSA in the comics is more in the way that they do the time on it is more in the 30s and 40s. And then they were precursors to the Justice League. But so when this was first announced, I thought, oh, are they doing a period piece? Is this going to be in the 30s or 40s? Yeah. But they made it current day. And then we meet the Justice League, and they're working with Waller, which is a little like, Waller to me has now become kind of nebulous in the DCEU because everyone's working with her, and she runs the Suicide Squad, and she's not really a good person. So I don't see them working with her, but maybe she's the government liaison to the superhero world, and I get that. But we meet the Justice League, and it was cool with the nod with Atom Smasher and the original Atom Smasher, Al Pratt, which is Henry Winkler, which I thought that was really cool. A nice little nod to the legacy of that. Yeah. But then we're like, oh, now we meet Cyclone, and now we meet this, and they're all together. So I'm like, and I know you can't spend time on them. It's not their movie, but I would have liked to have seen a little more. How is this JSA operating? It seemed like him and Dr. Fate hadn't been together for a while. But we meet him real quick and they get into the mission. And again, it's not their film, so I got that. But as a fan, I'm kind of like, all right, I'd like to see a little more of them. Well, let's dive into talking more about the JSA, because they were actually my favorite part of the film.
I thought, first and foremost, before we dive into the characters, the costuming in this film was excellent. I thought the colors, Dr. Fate's helmet, Hawkman's wings, I thought all of it, Atom Smasher, the effects was brilliant. Like, it instantly made me interested. And I don't know a ton about these characters and didn't know a ton about them before this film. I instantly became interested in them. Part of it was their performances, but I think costuming should be nominated for an Oscar for this film. And it will never get nominated, but it should be.
Like, I noticed in the credits, I'll have to look it up. It's two first names. It was like a duo that does these. And I was gonna say, I've never seen them before in a film. But the costumes, you're right, they were fantastic. Like, Fate could look a little hokey if you wanted to, but it didn't. I was like, how are they going to do Hawkman? They did it great. Cyclone and Atom Smasher, even Black Adam's costume. So yeah, the costumes were great. I thought their effects work with them.
Yes.
It was fantastic. I know a lot of people were, when we first saw in a trailer or commercial, they showed Dr. Fate and how they did the kind of thing where it's Pierce Brosnan's face in a helmet and like, oh, it's Iron Man with the heads up. And I'm like, I get the comparison, but they only did that once in that film, which was great. But I thought the costume work was fantastic in this film. And I think that's why a lot of people are coming out of this film saying they want to see a JSA movie. And so
1,000%.
If that was the case, they 100% did a great job because they sold them on these characters coming back again.
Okay. So let's go through each of them. Well, first of all, I want to ask you, if you got to have a solo movie of one of the four characters from this film, not Black Adam, obviously, but the four JSA characters, whose story would you want to see first?
Oh. I'm torn because right off the top of my head, it's either Fate or Hawkman.
Same. Because
Hawkman, and it was interesting with this characterization, Hawkman has such a great character where he's reincarnated over and over. So there's always been different iterations of him. And this one they play the kind of more the angry, act first, think later guy who I'm more partial to. There was a run recently, I believe his name was Robert Vendretti, and Brian Hitch did like a 12-issue great story encompassing his confusing history into 12 issues. He's more of a scholar. He's an archaeologist. So that's the version I like. So going into this, once I saw it wasn't that, I kind of had to adjust.
Okay.
But Aldous Hodge was great. So to see him, I would love to see him kind of in this story through the ages of discovering his other, Hawk Girl or Hawk Woman is his kind of soulmate. And they're always kind of missing each other in time and their lives, they have to kind of reconnect. And I think that would be a phenomenal story to tell.
Did you like the sort of hinted romance between like Atom Smasher and Cyclone? Did you appreciate that? Did you?
For me, I have to say this, like going in, I knew Aldous Hodge, I knew Pierce Brosnan, of course. So but Noah Centineo, I believe his name. I'm mispronouncing his last name. Is it
Centineo? I think it's Centineo. Yeah.
So I had no idea who this kid is. And then about 2 years ago, he got cast in everything. He was cast in like a Masters of the Universe movie that never went anywhere. I'm like, who is this kid that now they're throwing in these big things? I was like, I don't know this kid. So the He-Man never came through and I don't know anything else he's been in. So he, to me, was the great surprise of this film. Like I would say, of course, Pierce Brosnan would be my favorite, but seeing him and his interactions with all of them and I know I kind of got in a little argument with my girlfriend about this because I like the him and Cyclone stuff in like they were small scenes. They were just small little character scenes, but they just worked for me. And his kind of naivety and earnestness in his performance, like just when he's walking up with the bucket of chicken, eating it, and Dr. Fate kind of makes disappear. He's like, not now. Like it's those little moments. He never overplayed it. But this actor won me over as a fan on this role and what he did with so little dialogue.
So I agree with you. He reminded me a little bit of when we first saw Chris Pratt in Guardians of the Galaxy, that little bit of a doofiness, that doofy energy that you enjoy him. He's just fun to watch. He doesn't overdo it. He knows how to play the humor. And I don't want to, do I want to call him out? I don't know. I think in Justice League, like the Flash character, they made him do too much. Like you could tell they were probably on set going, more jokes, improvise, do more. And it was too much.
Right. Yeah.
In this case, nothing was sort of overdone in terms of who he was. I did appreciate the snacking. I mean, that said, of the four, he would be the last one whose origin story I would want to see first. I thought Pierce was amazing. I thought his Dr. Fate was so interesting, but it also makes sense because Doctor Strange is probably my favorite Marvel character.
Yeah.
So I love the sort of sorcerer aspect of it, the person who's super smart that has a vision.
Yeah.
But I thought he was, he's just like that character, and that performance could have gone very wrong.
Oh, but 100%. Yeah. And
gone very
yeah. And
wrong.
it's so funny because, again, with my girl, I love seeing these movies with my girlfriend because she's not attached to them like I am. Like she's no barometer to judge superhero films, and she doesn't know the history. So she just goes in to enjoy them. And she's like, oh, so he's kind of like Doctor Strange, huh? Yeah. And then I have to my glasses. Well, actually, Dr. Fate came first, and this and this. And,
right.
So
in the comics, he came
right,
first.
In the comics.
Yes.
So,
yes.
She's like, oh, I didn't know that. So, and they kind of went into how like DC and Marvel, for every Marvel or DC character, there's a counterpart in DC. There's Hawkeye and Green Arrow, so, and just kind of going through the history of comics with her and how the two companies at the time would compete. But I agree, and she's just like, I don't care. He came first, second, that. And she says, I don't know if Nick, you might know what this word is. I don't know what it is. The smize. She's like, they've got the smirk, but he's got the smize. And is it a smirk and a smile?
Yes, this is from the Tyra Banks School of Modeling.
Okay,
this
there we go.
Came out
That's what
from
it is.
America's Next Top Model, and smizing is when you kind of like you smile with your eyes. So smile eyes. So it's like
okay, yeah, she's got.
So she thought Pierce.
Oh. She's all about Pierce.
I think they all smized, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think they all got it down, except maybe Aldous, because he was a little more brooding, as you said.
Yeah.
Which he was so good in this. He was and this is one thing I will say to your point as well about Noah's performance. Is it Joan Colette Sarah? Is that how you pronounce his first name? Joan?
I thought it was Jamae.
Okay, thank you.
I could be completely wrong because I know we talked a lot about it with my other co-hosts when this was all announced, and someone had came on and they were like, it's Jamae.
Jamae Colette Sarah, who is the director who directed Jungle Cruise, and who directed The Shallows with Blake Lively. And what I think he does well, and what sometimes in superhero movies we don't see, is real acting. So when you were talking about those quiet moments between the two of them, he allows his actors to really act. So even though it's a superhero movie, all of the JSA had strong performances. Nothing was sort of cliche or like surface level. You felt these characters had a history. You felt they had a history with each other. You felt there was an emotional depth to all of them. And they were allowed to sort of have those acting moments.
With the acting, especially with the kid, they're like, oh, he's a kid, this and that. I was like, I actually really like the kid. And he wasn't like the overbearing, precocious, look at me, I'm going to be wink cute for the audience. I really enjoyed him. And I'm going to say this because not many people are talking about it, but the performance for me, I think that was the best overall acting performance of the film was Sarah Shahi. I thought, and maybe she didn't have the flashy role. She wasn't a superhero or anything, but I thought her performance was the foundation for this entire film. And I didn't realize how big a part she was going to have in it. And I thought her acting as this kind of freedom fighter, but a mother, just grounded and brought all the other pieces together as she was kind of like the central hub on that wheel that brought everyone together. So
the son, Eamon, the character Eamon, that's who you were talking about with the kid. Yeah. Yeah. Eamon was the kid as far as. I think, the skateboarding stuff didn't really work and how he kept getting away from the sort of the guard. Yeah. I guess it was okay. It was a little Back to the Future, but, but I actually am going to disagree about Sarah. Okay. Please do. I felt like part of it was that she had so much exposition dialogue. Mm-hmm. It was on her shoulders to explain a lot of the film with her dialogue. And that's a tough gig. I mean, you probably know this as an actor. Those sort of lines, when you're given those lines where you're given, it has sort of, you're talking, but it has nothing to do with the story. You're telling the story without acting out the story. Maybe you can speak to that, how hard it is. But I didn't love her character, and I didn't necessarily think some of that side story was necessary. Like towards the end, when the zombies, calling them zombies, happened, and the kid was like getting his people united to fight the zombies. I was like, this looks like it's going to be like they're going to break into a flash mob dance, like in the town square. Like they're all going to do the Thriller. It was a little bit like, I don't know. I don't know if we needed to see them throughout at that point, and then they kept meeting up with the JSA no matter where they were in the city. Like they just ran into them all the time. Like how did that happen? Like it just seemed a little contrived. So I don't maybe necessarily think it was her fault, but I didn't love her character.
It's tough because, and maybe that's why she's not being as mentioned in all the reviews and all the people talking about the film, because maybe they did have a problem with it. I think for me, exposition dumps are always tough when you're doing dialogue, especially when you're talking about, Kondak and Eternium and all these different minerals and stuff. But for me, it's like, and I get why the filmmakers needed that. It's the audience's, or what they think is the audience's eye into the world. Yes. I always look back in the old Masters of the Universe Dolph Lundgren movie. It's like, you want to go see He-Man and Skeletor fight, and then what's Courtney Cox doing popping up in there and her boyfriend that works at a chicken joint? But the audience is like, we got to have the audience see themselves in this movie in some way, and this is their key to get into this world. So it's such a tough, so she's fighting like three battles. She's got the dialogue, she's got trying to be the audience's eyes, and then trying to be a fully fleshed out character in that world. So I definitely see, and that could be why people aren't talking about the role as much. Maybe they were like, every time she pops up, here comes exposition. Yeah. And I do like for me, and you brought that up, the zombies, that was the one I'm kind of like, oh, we're doing zombies now? Oh, yeah. I know he's the dead and he can wake the dead, or he's part of the underworld, but I guess they needed an army to fight. I think, it
wasn't horrible. It just was a little bit, I thought they were going to do the Thriller dance for sure. Like I thought they were all of a sudden all going to be, and then she and the kid were going to be leading it. And they're going to be like dancing
the hands of the triangles up doing a Thriller dance.
Yeah. This was going to be the whole thing. But I know from the comics, like maybe, I mean, they're definitely, if there is another one and they're setting up, she becomes his love interest later on. And doesn't he give some of his powers to the kid later on? It's
the family. Yeah. And they kind of do a dynamic with, kind of the Shazam family, where it's the families. A lot of guys are saying they're complaining about the character and why do we need a Black Adam movie? He really didn't come into significance until it was a series called 52, and it was like a weekly series back in I want to say it's 2006, 2007. Oh, wow. And since then he kind of took over, and it makes sense because around the time The Rock probably had gotten invested in the character. He saw this character come into popularity in comics and said, oh, I can play that. That'll be great for me. But yeah, I believe she turns into Isis. I could be completely wrong on that. I'm trying to think of, because again, the character was never really something that I gravitated to. But then the son also becomes this kind of, I don't want to say family, but this unit of together, and he falls in love with her. And so they are setting that up. And I want to say that she played his wife in the movie, in the flashbacks. I thought that was her. When they talk about her at the beginning, and she's kind of covered up with they covered her up with a shawl, and it was kind of like I was like, oh, I think that's her.
You thought it was Sarah Shahi?
I think so. Oh, I could be wrong. Interesting. But I could have sworn once they had him revealed, and it was him, like with big head and skinny body, as people were saying, and they did that quick shot of the wife. I was like, I thought that's her, but I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong.
No, but that would be an interesting little twist that they were the original family, and she was.
And I don't know if that was a nod to the comics, and people are saying, hey, we know what's going to happen with them. We're just teasing that their connection is there. Or I could be completely wrong and it's a different actress.
I want to give a shout out to Jalen Christian, who played Harut, who was the Rock's son.
Yeah.
Who I thought did a really nice job. And as well, and I apologize, I'm reading these names, but Mohammed Amer, who played the brother, who was kind of the comic relief. Right. And, there was a little bit of when they first went into the tomb in the opener, when Sarah's character goes in and he's sitting in the van. And what was the song that was playing? Oh. And then it played again later on.
Is it Rick Astley, Never Gonna Give You Up?
Was it? Yeah, it was something.
Might be that.
It might have been it. But I was like, oh, I've seen this before in movies. I saw it in Stranger Things, like the kid with the pizza kid in the van this past season. Like I've seen this before, where he's sitting there with his headphones on and then something happens. And I was like, oh, don't do that. We've seen that before. But then I was like, oh, but I actually love him and we must protect him at all costs. Like through the whole movie, like when he got hurt, I was like, no. Yeah. And I was glad that he was okay. But he was. I'm sorry. No, I was going to say, like, I love personally, because I see so many movies. I like seeing unknowns. I like seeing fresh new faces. I like, in terms of representation, I thought it was really great. And I just thought it was just refreshing to see these new people, and I want to see more of them. And they did a good job. So that hats off to them for holding their own.
Yeah, I loved him. I remember in the trailer, they showed that scene of the van. I'm like, oh, is this going to be like the annoying sidekick comedy relief?
Yes.
But he wasn't, because he was very heartfelt. Like, again, these, like, the humor worked for me. It got, wasn't like laugh out loud crying humor, but it was subtle in certain places. But that character, and again, I've never seen him before in anything, and I enjoyed him. Like, he's like, you don't die, you die by electricity. He's like, I'm an electrician. Like, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's great. And I really enjoyed his character.
Okay, so let's talk about the meat of the film, and that is the action, which I think a lot of people agree that the action was done really, really well. They're like, oh, when The Rock signed on to do this, he was going to bring it. And they certainly did. I thought that the first fight between Black Adam and the JSA was like, and you see their powers, and Atom Smasher when he's like, gets big, and it's a great way to describe it. The only thing I wasn't 100% sure about was the choice of colors for Cyclone. Like, it took me a second to get used to sort of seeing how, her, whatever you want to call it, was all these sort of colors that reminded me a little bit of Morbius. If you remember Morbius, like I was like, oh no, is that what we're doing again?
Yeah.
But then I was like, no, I see why they did it. It was probably a tough choice of sort of how to visualize that. But I don't know if that's a comic thing too, if that was sort of always her colors.
With Cyclone, I believe so. I'm not as familiar with her because from what I remember, she's a descendant of Red Tornado.
Yeah.
And they again, that was one of those things they talk about nanobots and fixing the guy, and they're watching him and she's like, the nanobots are her, and that makes her powers. And I'm like, oh, they're really going through this one fast speed. Right. So I thought, and again, I'm looking at it from like, okay, so they're in Kahndaq. It's all browns, yellows, oranges. They've got to fade is yellow.
Yes.
So you got that in there.
Oh yeah.
You've got to get some color going. And she brought that green pop with her suit. So yeah, I'm not sure what the colors. I don't know if it's kind of like with her hair and her suit, the green. It's showing like a trailing off of it, so it's like the colors spin. But as far as the action goes, like I've got to say, like a lot of times we're thrown out like, oh, the CGI in some scenes. Like I don't know, because from the beginning we understand where this world is and the character, but there was never any standout bad CGI for me. I thought the moments of, I know people didn't like the slow-mo a lot, but I thought those were used sparingly and done really well. I thought a great integration of the CGI with their powers and the world.
You didn't think the slow-mo didn't stand out to me in any negative way. I mean, I guess the argument is that the third act, which I like, they didn't belabor it. It wasn't a super long third act. They kind of made the second act the bulk of the fun action between the JSA and Black Adam. And then, and then as they team up later, I loved watching them fight and sort of interact with each other and work together. But I didn't think, I hate it when the third act is too long and what's going to happen. And they didn't do that, but it was CG heavy for sure. It was, but I wasn't mad at it.
Yeah. This is the thing. Like the entire thing was CGI, but it wasn't to me bad. Like you were like, oh, they had to, that's a pickup shot that they added and they didn't have the money to finish. Like it just all was a very seamless film to me, maybe because this film has been in the works for so long, but I feel exactly like you. Like I knew at one point where Black Adam kind of resigns himself to the Justice Society. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. There's that shot in the trailer of him being put in a water coffin or whatever. It's like, we haven't seen that yet. It's like, and I know Sabaka's in this. Well, we got a third act coming. But then once it got going and didn't let up. So I think, I don't know if we needed Sabak. I think if it would just been the JSA versus The Rock, I think it would have been
interesting.
Yeah. There would have needed to be different resolutions at the end, but I think it would have been a stronger film without that tertiary character in there.
Yeah. It wasn't a strong enough.
Yeah, it was kind of, and it's not like it's the Joker, you're saving for the third act or something. He's Sabak, and no one was clamoring to see him in a film, as far as I know. My apologies to any Sabak fans out there. But it was cool, and it was done well. But again,
it was a cool death.
Yeah, very cool. And yes, very cool death. And it set up the ending there. So, hey, you kept the movie under 2 hours, and you had a great 3-act, film. So I don't think it wasn't like this film was 2.5 hours. You're like, man, come on, you need to trim this thing down.
So I have a question.
Okay.
Why did Amanda Waller
I think
bring the Suicide Squad together when she had the JSA already?
That to me, Nikki, when like yesterday when I'm sitting there trying to kind of talk about what we'll talk about, I'm like, I don't understand. And I think they're trying to make Viola Davis like the Samuel L. Jackson of the DCU, where she connects them all. And I get that. And I think it's a strong choice. And she brings it every time she shows up. But they need to let us know, like, okay, she's the government liaison with superheroes, but she's also running this black site, Task Force X, that no one knows about, because the way it's set, she's working with Hawkman. They're going over the profiles of all the characters. There's no way they would work with them if they knew they were also working with the Suicide Squad and these awful villains. So I think we needed to establish, or do need to establish, somewhere where Waller is kind of like the real world government face of superhero, kind of like in the MCU at what General Ross was. He was the government guy, but I'm the liaison to superheroes. She's the liaison to deal with the Justice League, with Superman. She'll talk to them on the government's behalf, but also even most people in the government don't know I've got this little Black Ops program, but then they've got secret prisons in the Arctic. So she's got a budget. So there's a lot there that, and again, this was not the movie to explain that. I get that.
There was a lot to do. And I think maybe also the stuff that she sends the Suicide Squad to do is beneath the JSA's pay grade.
Of course.
They're like, sorry, we're not touching this.
Right. 100% right. But I just think audience members, and I think that's why they're like, oh, the DC is so messy. And I get the problems people have with what WB is trying to do with DC. We just need this kind of framework. Like, what are the rules of this world we're playing in? Waller is a great character. And Viola Davis is a great catch as an actress to have in that role. Just let us know. She's working with both teams, but the teams don't know about everything that's going on. Because the Justice Society would shut that down in a heartbeat. So is that the question you thought I was going to ask? You said, I think I know. No, just the messiness of it. I 100% thought. Because for me, it was like, okay, the pieces are there. The JSA is there. Task Force X is there. And okay, now she's working with the Justice League again. Let me know what this framework is. Give us the building blocks, let us know. Yeah. So here's my second big question that I'm confused about. Why did Dr. Fate need to go into the building at that particular moment? Because he went to sacrifice himself. Mm-hmm. Did he really need to go in that particular juncture? Because nothing was happening at that moment. Like, why couldn't he just wait? I'm kind of like, and again, they were tiptoeing against Marvel with the Endgame, where Doctor Strange knew all the outcomes. And so he knew. So magic is always so tricky in films. It's like, because you're like, well, why didn't you just do this? You're a magic. Why didn't you just, erase Thanos' memory? And like, so it's so tough. And I'm like, my only thought was because he knew the outcome had to happen that particular way. He saw Hawkman dying, but he knew it was going to be him. And on the other hand, I think it's safe to say that he's not really dead. His essence will live in the helmet. Because there's no way you kill off Pierce Brosnan and not have him back for a sequel. You just don't do it. That's what I was going to say. Did I spoil it or something? I'm like, no, I mean, this is a spoiler discussion. Right, but here's my question. Yeah. He's so good in it. He's cool to do more movies. He's not doing Bond right now. He's cool to do it. He's got time. Yep. His career's, he's working a lot, but like, this is a great move. So why did they have to kill him off? Like, did someone just have to die in this? Like, it kind of seemed like, if you're going to kill off a major character in the JSA, earn it, do it down the road. Did it need to happen is my question. Because now if we're going to have him in, well, yes, like you said, anything can happen. There's magic and all these things. But now are we going to have to go back and do a prequel, which I'd be fine with to go back to and do a prequel, but isn't it going to be a different age? And I don't know. All of that. Nikki, that brings it to the point of it being confusing. Like, okay, are you going to do a prequel? Great. But is that going to confuse everyone with these characters we just met? Like, I'm kind of curious in the thought of the script phase and writing of it, because there's always I don't want to say it always seems like the person of color is the one that dies.
Yeah.
In these, and like, there's a lot of flack that Andor's getting right now.
Yeah.
In this last 2 episodes ago, where the 2 great character deaths were people of color, and did they see and go, okay, well, this we know that will be a problem going forward. Do we shift, or did they just say this fit the story? Because I knew Hawkman wasn't going to die, but then when they were teasing him, I'm like, oh, they're going to prevent his death. So I don't know if they were behind the scenes talk happening during the production phase, like, well, Aldous Hodge was cast. So once that role was cast with the man of color, okay, we're not killing off Hawkman. Or, that's the pieces of puzzle to take to make a movie, and the choices that happen, you never know. But Aldous Hodge, I know he's a younger actor. Do we want to see more movies with him? Whereas Fate is at the end of his career. He makes the choice to die. We're not going to kill off Atom Smasher or Cyclone because they're new. So
right.
I don't know if it ever came between the 2 of them, and maybe different script versions had Hawkman dying. I don't see that. I don't see them killing him off.
It might have been like Pierce might have been like, yeah, I'll come back and do this movie as a one-off. Right. And they didn't realize they were going to get lightning in a bottle. Like, he was going to be so fantastic, and it would be something that people would want to see more of because he is an older character. And
also then it does go like, well, we can always bring him back because of magic. And he could be the voice inside the helmet, that his soul is trapped in the helmet, which is, that's happened throughout all of comics. So I think maybe they were looking at that, like, we've got it in our back pocket. We don't know how they're going to react, but I think the minute he was cast, everyone was 100% behind that casting with him. So
before we move on to the big elephant in the room, that is Henry Cavill's Superman returning in the mid-credits, favorite or least favorite moment, that anything else that we sort of haven't dove into?
I guess for me, the underlying was the surprise of Atom Smasher. I was really just not even invested in him at all going into this film. And that I have to say, I'll go for on a big swing. It's The Rock. I don't show up to every movie that he does. I love him as a person and as a celebrity, but he's not someone that I have to see the new Rock movie when it comes out, or the new Dwayne Johnson movie. But for me, because he was the big elephant in the room, like, is he going to have a fully fledged character that makes me forget the world of Dwayne Johnson? And he 100% did that. So yeah, those were my 2 big surprises. As far as the weakest thing, probably the villain, Sabak, at the end. It was just kind of an afterthought for me.
Yeah, I think the switch and sort of having the visual switch of the villain. Yeah. Like, I know it was him, but
right.
It was just having it. I think maybe if we had seen him more. Yeah. Visually, I thought he was fine. But fine. It was kind of a switch, and yeah, I'm trying to think of fine. Like. Yeah, I think nothing really. I mean, I think there was a couple corny moments, and that's another thing. Like, people talked about the movie feeling very like early 2000s, but I love that era. Maybe that's why I enjoyed it so much.
I was thinking, I think it's like maybe like a lot of those music beats that it threw in all of a sudden. But I have to say, like, Dwayne Johnson knows audiences, and they knows what they love of his film. So I think he knows what they come to see, and he's such a lover of movies and a lover of audiences and wanting to please his audience. And I think those beats were thrown in because he knows they like those in those movies with him. So he's trying to give them everything.
He is. And he's, speaking of everything, he did this thing during the lead up to this film where he all but told everybody that Superman was going to show up in this. Yeah. And he has even talked about, I saw an interview where somebody asked him about, is it Barry Keoghan who played Joker in the Batman? Is that his name? Yes. Barry Keoghan?
Yes. Yeah. I think I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but I think you're pronouncing it right. I will not try to, but yes, Barry Keoghan.
Where he said something like, "Oh, interesting that you liked him. Stay tuned." And it's just like he's playing his hand. He's showing everybody his hand. Kind of, I think he's so eager to tease that I think he should pull back a little bit. So I'll just ask first, like, how did you feel about the Henry Cavill moment? Because I can't contain myself with excitement.
It's one of those things. Like, I love Cavill in the role. I love Man of Steel. I'm an avid, anyone that knows me, especially even on Rotten Tomatoes, like I was on the Rotten Tomatoes is wrong about Batman versus Superman. I love that film. I love Snyder's take on these characters. So for him, I never felt like he was gone. I figured, like, there's something going on. The whole WB, Discovery, everything BS, something's going on. But he's always said, he's like, I still have the cape. And his agents are always like, he's still Superman until they say otherwise. I hate that it was put out there. I know a lot of people are saying that they needed to put that out there because the movie wasn't tracking well. I think people would have gone to see this movie regardless because of The Rock. And then when you find out what was in it, I think word of mouth would have built. So I think that it was like with the No Way Home. We all knew Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were in this film. They never said it, but we all knew they were in this.
Yeah.
You couldn't hide from that, even if you wanted to avoid anything on the internet. We knew they were in it. When they showed up, though, it was still incredible.
Well, Mr. Cavill has never had a finer moment on screen. IMO, in my opinion. Those 10 seconds were gold, silver, bronze, all of the medals in all of the DC universe. It was phenomenal. The curl, the curl is back, or there for the first time for him. He looked amazing. He looked a little older than we've seen him before, as he is. It was been since 2013 since we had a Man of Steel movie, but he looked more like Superman than I've ever seen him look. Like, he looked phenomenal. His cheekiness, the way he delivered the line, I was like, that, sir, is a movie star. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a movie star. Congratulations. Worth the price of admission right there.
100%. Like, I mean, and you know it's coming. You know, the Amanda Waller drone flies in there. We all know what's coming at this point. But then the John Williams theme kind of, there's a little John Williams, and like I got little goosebumps in it because he's so good in the role. He doesn't get it in. And everyone out there, whether you hate Zack Snyder and his films, or you don't like Henry, or you don't like what they did with the character, everyone wants Henry Cavill for another film. They all like give him Man of Steel 2. Yeah. They want that. So I think The Rock, and now I hear reports they were planning to film that cameo without the head. It was just going to be the body like they did with Shazam. I'm like, are you out of your mind? You don't do that if you can't get Henry Cavill back. Because I think that was, everyone's like, what's going on with DC, this and that. I think The Rock was kind of like, we got it. We're finally getting there. We're listening to audiences. So I think that is a great feeling to know that Cavill is back. Hopefully they're going to do another movie. We get him a solo film. But it was just, he's great in the role. I think, and it's tough because WB's in a tough spot. There are a very vocal fandom that love him in that role. And, with the Snyder cut and all that came forward, and, whether people want to say it or not, and maybe this is a bad take with me, as long as Henry Cavill is in the role of Superman, whether you give him a spit curl, put John Williams, or put a red and blue bright suit, the DNA of Zack Snyder is still there. So it kind of sat, we're not getting the Snyder verse that everyone wanted with his Justice League 2 and 3. That's not going to happen. But you're still getting the world that he created. So I think it's kind of the best of both worlds, where it's going in a new direction, but honoring the past. What's the saying? You respect the past, honor the past, but respect the future, or vice versa, where it's like, you're getting the best of both worlds. You're getting this Zack Snyder created character, but it's going to be taken a different direction with the same actor. So the suit was brighter than everybody talked about.
Yeah, like it did have, the original imprint, but it also felt it felt like he had evolved, and it felt like, oh, where you been? I want to know what's going on. Obviously we want to see more of him.
100%.
So, here was my question.
Okay.
In my theater, I would say half the people in my theater got up and left before the Cavill thing. And I was like, are you nuts? What rock have you been living under? Because what did you just go, okay, we're going to go to a movie. What should we go see? Oh, I hear The Rock's in a new movie. Do they have no understanding? Like, how do you get up and not watch it?
Well, I've had a new perspective on that. Like, the Marvel films have kind of trained audiences to expect a post-credit scene. And I was in a couple DC films where there wasn't one, and people were like, oh, that's a missed opportunity. Whereas, and I remember in Black Panther, watching that film, and I'd say over half the audience got up at the end credits, before the post credits, and my friend Dean Dover's like, yeah, Mike, remember this film is bringing in audiences that have never seen superhero films before. They're finally being represented, so they're not used to an MCU film where we're getting this. So you have to remember that. And so with The Rock, I don't know if his films do a lot of post credits, so could be that half the audiences were just there, they didn't care. And I saw an exit poll. It was a majority of the people were there for the film because it was a Dwayne Johnson film, not because it was a DC film.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, so they're not used to his films having post-credit scenes. They're not used to a superhero film or what comes. They're just for the Dwayne Johnson movie. He doesn't do post-credits. There's no reason to stick around. So yeah, my audience, not a lot, is a few. But again, I saw it on a Sunday morning, and it's not really the most energetic crowd.
Same. Yeah.
So yeah, it was interesting. But I expect that, unless it's even in Marvel films, I still see people get up and walk. And I'm like, what do you guys, there's been 23 of these. We're going to get 5 more post credits. What are you guys doing? But
I know. It does. There is always too much of a good thing. So let's talk about, as we wrap up the conversation, let's talk about the future of Black Adam, of the Justice Society, of DCEU in general. Like, if you had your choice, like, what do you think should come next? What should be the next film in this?
Well, we're such in a weird place because all these films are done. All these films, The Flash, Aquaman, Blue Beetle, where we're supposed to know what's going to be happening with the DCEU. Like, apparently The Flash is the one that kind of sets everything on the course of what's going forward. But do we know that now? I mean, Black Adam, I believe, was always supposed to come out before The Flash.
Black Adam was supposed to originally come out in 2019, I believe. Okay,
yeah. So it was always before The Flash.
Or maybe it was 2021. But it did get delayed.
Nikki, I have always been DC's most vocal supporter and champion, and to much to my detriment online about that. But I'm even in a place right now, like, I don't know what's going on. I love the Batman, but I know that's completely separate. From what I'm hearing, The Flash is phenomenal. Like, same. I've heard a lot of people kind of, and I never go online with like, oh, my sources say this, because I don't put myself out there like that. But I'm hearing around Burbank and in Los Angeles that The Flash is just phenomenal. And I think there's a reason why they're sticking with Miller through it. Like, they know they've got a good film on their hands. They know where it ends and what it sets up. So for me, I'm kind of in a wait and see place. I would love to, and I know people are clamoring for Shazam or for Black Adam and Superman, but it's like him and Shazam needs to happen. The two of them, because that's the big fun of those characters, when those kind of worlds collide. And it seems like with Fury of the Gods, the next Shazam film, that they're really going into the gods and bringing that world so much bigger than the first one. And I think the Black Adam would be because Shazam is said in Black Adam, but they never mention the champion of Shazam.
Yeah.
And in the first Shazam, they did talk about the champion, and it was kind of a bald guy with robes. So there's the light connectivity, but this film seemed like to not want to even address that out. But Jaimin Hansu, the wizard, was there. So it's connectivity, but not in a... And
they said Shazam a lot.
Yeah. It's there. It's there. The DNA is there. I just don't know how to go forward. I don't know if another Black Adam solo movie is necessary. I think you've got to fold him with Shazam.
I think it has to be down the road.
Yeah.
I think personally, Man of Steel 2,
absolutely,
it doesn't have to be called that, obviously, but you need that before you need anything else. Now, I agree with what you're saying about The Flash. I've heard the same thing. I think that is going to be the connective tissue that people are saying is missing and sort of setting up the future. I think we need to catch up with Superman. He is a core character that we have been missing. I know The Rock has teased. People have asked him about the fight with Shazam versus the fight with Cavill. He wants Black Adam versus Superman because I think he's thinking box office. I think he's thinking like what's going to be best for Dwayne Johnson, which I don't blame him for.
Right.
But I think in terms of order, I would like to see Superman. Then I'd be fine with seeing Black Adam versus Superman. Then I'd be fine with the Shazam versus Black Adam. But I don't know about another Black Adam movie until I see what else happens.
Right. It's so, you're 100% right. And a Man of Steel 2 would 100% work on its own. Like, just like as the Batman proved. I mean, again, that was disassociated from what we've got going on here, but people want Cavill in the role. I think if it's done well and you give us a villain that we haven't seen, like a Brainiac or something, I really think the audiences will be there for it. And this world is set up now. Like he said, I think people should feel a little bit better. Like, okay, we've got Cavill back. Now we know who our Superman is in this world. Yeah. Let's go forward from there.
Well, I want to thank you for joining.
My pleasure.
Before I let you go.
Yes.
Where does this rank in the DCEU for you? Where does this movie rank?
I knew you were going to say that. And because I can't include the Batman in there because that's not really part of this. It's in the middle to the lower somehow. I'll say this, Nikki, and I get a lot of crap for this. I am a huge lover of Wonder Woman 84. So that my ranking when it comes to like my opinion and what I love, it's very different from everybody, but I have such a love for that movie. And I know it's not a great movie, but there's and I love Aquaman. I love Aquaman.
Oh,
and I would
just
never
said the magic word.
I would have never thought in a million years, Nikki, if you said, here's going to be the 5 DC films you can pick. Which one do you want to see? Aquaman would have been the last, 100% last. But I just fell in love with that character, the way that they had so much fun making the movie and the way that they said, you know what? We don't know if we're ever going to get a sequel, so we're going to give you everything in this film. So I think time will be kind to me in this film. Right now, it's kind of mid to bottom in the DCU. It's better than Suicide Squad, the first one. But again, that for me is more on the characters. The characters were not someone that I'm attached to on any level outside of Fate, really.
I mean, people give the DC and the DCU flack, but I have to say, I loved Wonder Woman. I loved Aquaman. Yeah. I loved Man of Steel. I love so many of these films that I would put this one kind of upper mid, I would say, but that's because there was a high bar set from me. But Aquaman, I think Wonder Woman is a better movie, but Aquaman is still my number one. I turn it on over and over. I put it on if I want to rewatch a superhero movie and I'm going to have it on while I'm cooking. That's what I'm putting on. That's my favorite.
I enjoy the hell out of that.
Anyway,
love it.
Mike, I want to thank you so much for being such an amazing guest and breaking down Black Adam with me, and let people know where they can find you. Find me at all social media at Mike Kalinowski. That's where if you need to talk DC with someone, I'm your guy. Please feel free to reach out. I love talking about this world. And we love talking about this world, and we love chatting with you guys, for you guys. So thank you all for tuning in for this episode of the After Show, and we will see you next time. Bye.